At Team Toyota, they've been selling and servicing new and used Toyotas in your community for over 50 years. And you can reserve your next new Toyota with them today. You'll get a realistic timeline, and even in this crazy market, they won't charge you over MSRP. Or don't wait at all. With over 75 certified Toyotas, including a bunch of RAV4 and Highlanders, you can drive one home today. And you can always trust them to maintain your current vehicle. Their service and collision centers are high-tech, comfortable, and will save you time and money. Team Toyota can help you go anywhere you want, but they'll always be your hometown team. Just visit teamtoyota.net and choose from 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Seidman, he's Ricky Bottalico, and we're sitting here going into Game 3 of this Phillies-Giants series, which has been futile for the Phillies from a situational hitting perspective. The last 2 losses heading into Tuesday night's game, the middle game, the main theme was a lack of success with runners in scoring position. And then, Ricky, that was the case Tuesday night to an almost exaggerated degree against Alex Cobb, who entered with the lowest ERA in the National League, but did not look like an ERA leader, did not have his best stuff. But man, 1 for 33 with runners in scoring position are the Phillies in these last 3 games. It's difficult to ever pinpoint one reason why. Is this just a case of guys feeling too much pressure and trying to do too much?
I maybe trying to do too much. I don't think they really feel pressure. I mean, you're going up and just taking your at-bats. I would say, in those at-bats last night, there were 1 for 11. I would say there were 3 or 4 hard hit balls, but right at people. So, I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of where you hit the baseball, not necessarily how hard you hit it. But, I mean, when you really think about it, what starts to happen is that they don't necessarily know that they've been, 1 for 33. They don't necessarily know that until, guess what? We say it and ask them questions about it. And then they realize, wow, we're really struggling with runners in scoring position. But, I mean, you have to relax. You have to take it just like any other at-bat. I mean, they don't do the situational hitting for the most part, unless there's 2 strikes, a runner on second base, and less than 2 outs. I mean, you don't really see the situational type hitting. So what you are seeing is guys, in their simple launch modes. And sometimes it's a matter of just being selective at the plate. I mean, you could bring up a ton of guys that were swinging at pitches that were out of the zone last night, swinging at pitches in hitters' counts. Those type of things. Those are mental aspects of the game. You could simply think about what you're doing up at the plate, make yourself a little bit of a zone that you want that ball in, and if it's not in it, go to the next pitch. I just think they're really kind of pressing, I guess would be the best word for it, pressing for that big hit, when sometimes it's just about passing it on to the next guy.
Yeah, the Phillies are hitting .231 on the season with runners in scoring position. They rank 26th in the majors in that category. Interestingly, the Braves rank just behind the Phillies. The Braves are hitting .231 with runners in scoring position. That's obviously one of the best offenses in baseball. I think that's just emblematic of the notion that these things fluctuate. Teams go through cycles where they don't hit with runners in scoring position, and then they do. With the Phillies offense, I guess one of the frustrating elements has been that it seems like for half the season, they haven't hit situationally so far. And for the other half of the season, they haven't taken pitches or walked. You have a night like last night where they took their walks. They reached base a lot. I think they had 10 hits. They had a handful of walks, and they still couldn't push runs across. I'm looking up and down the lineup. I mean, one glaring spot where they need more, and this isn't breaking news, but they need more out of Trey Turner. He came up in some big spots in Game 2 last night. I know he doubled in his first at bat, or he got on base in his first at bat, but Turner is he's just going in a bad way at the plate. We talked earlier this week about how it always feels like he's 0-2 or 1-2. Man, it's like you expect at the back of the baseball card he's going to get back to his levels, and you looked at the fact that he had a slow start relatively last season, but just on an at-bat basis, not seeing much of an adjustment so far from him.
He's putting himself into those situations. You brought up the 0-2, 1-2 counts. He's swinging at pitches like there's 2 strikes on every pitch. I mean, so if you're throwing an elevated fastball, he's swinging through it. You're throwing a breaking ball early on in the count. He's off balance, swinging through it. That tells me he's anxious. that tells me there's a lot of pressure on him every time he's stepping to the plate, because I want you to think back to the WBC and how comfortable he looked at the plate and how relaxed he was at the plate. You don't see that. From the moment he steps into the box, you can almost see the tension around this guy. You have to let the ball come to you. A perfect example. We watched Nick Castellanos do the same thing for a full season last year, jumping out at the baseball, trying to attack the ball before it gets to you. This is something where I think where Trey Turner is right now. Maybe he's putting a little bit too much on his plate right now about the move, about the being signed for so much money. That does play a little bit of a mind game on you. And like I said, we saw it with Nick Castellanos last year. He came back this year. He's a completely different person. But you can't have that last the whole season for Trey Turner. This is a guy that you stuck in that 2-hole, and you want him to produce. He's not producing at all right now. I mean, he's every now and again he's running into a pitch. But if just take a look at this, the only pitches he is hitting right now are pitchers' mistakes. A 1-2 pitch that's hung out over the plate, an 0-2 curveball that doesn't break. Those are the only pitches he's really attacking and hitting well. I think it's because he's almost in a defense mode. Sometimes you got to take a step back before you keep pushing forward. The more you push forward, the more you're going to get yourself into bad situations. I think he's got to be a little bit more patient up at the plate also. You just talked about that a little bit. I mean, getting favorable counts every once in a while, it's hard to hit in Major League Baseball when the count's 1-2 and 0-2 all the time. It's almost impossible to hit like that. And that's where he finds himself right now. And digging out of that hole, the only way to dig out of that hole is to be more patient up at the plate. I don't know if he has that in him right now.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of chasing pitches outside the strike zone, Trey Turner this season, 41% of pitches outside the strike zone he swung at. His career, 31%. So a 10% increase from his career in terms of chasing pitches. His hard hit rate is at a career low percentage. I mean, it's not like he has been lining out and it's been fluky, the lack of success over the last month. But yeah, the Phillies need to get Trey Turner going quickly. It's strange because wouldn't you have thought that Bryce Harper's return would have coincided with everybody in that cluster of the top of the lineup feeling less pressure and kind of just settling in, knowing that they have the former MVP back and batting third and hitting the ground running?
Well, I'll ask you a question behind that. Do you think they relaxed almost too much? You're getting Bryce Harper back. That's a big chunk of run production. He's going to hit the ground with his feet running. It's exactly what he did. And maybe that piano on everybody's back was a good thing for a while. Maybe you got to get back to that, get back to the intense at-bats that you had and kind of play like that. I think sometimes guys will take a step back because they almost say, oh, Bryce is here. Thank goodness. We don't have to do as much. Where I look at it on the other hand, man, keep swinging the bats and see how much damage you could possibly do to another team. But see, there's just two frames of mind that could be happening. This will all work itself out. I really believe that. I think you have too many good hitters in the lineup not to kind of tear it up at one point or another. We talked about this in the last podcast, is that we haven't seen 3 or 4 guys going at the same time. I want you to picture when that happens, what these scores are going to be. Because if the Phillies go 5 for 11 last night with runners in scoring position, they win that game by 3 or 4 runs. It's just a matter of getting everybody going at the same time. And I'm not talking all 9 guys in the lineup. I'm talking 3 or 4 guys at the same time that are having good games. You're going to see these numbers change drastically. We've seen some games where I believe they were 9 for 19 in one game with runners in scoring position. That's the type of team I think they are, but they're just not there right now.
Right, because like right now, JT Real Muto is red hot. When some of these other guys were red hot in the first 2-3 weeks of the season, that was when Real Muto was going cold. You just looked up and down through the lineup. Brandon Marsh, for example, who was a candidate for player of the month in April. The on-base percentage still very high. He's down to 288, however. Edmundo Sosa perhaps been a bit overexposed playing every day, offensively at least. So I would say right now you have Real Muto hitting. Kyle Schwarber is doing his thing over the last week or so with the homers and the walks. Castellanos and Turner are still chasing too many pitches. But, another guy who's continued to impress, in my opinion, is Bryson Stott in the leadoff spot. He began Tuesday's game with another one of those extremely long plate appearances. I think it was like 10 pitches before reaching base. And that's something that he's shown he's able to do. Fouls off a lot of pitches, extends counts, works pitchers. That's what you want out of a leadoff batter. He's not, tearing the cover off the ball. He's hitting 281 with an on-base percentage. You still would like to be higher than 315, but I look at Bryson Stott and just, less than 2 years into his big league career, I see a guy who's going to be in the majors for at least a decade, just based on his offensive profile.
Yeah, and he's only going to get better as time goes by. I think the one thing that has really helped him out is that he's finally laying off that high fastball. We saw him last year. That was there were so many games where he'd get into 0-2, 1-2 counts and swing at the next pitch. All of a sudden, it's a 4-pitch at bat. As that season went on, he got better in those type of situations. And this year, I give him a lot of credit because he probably went home and his main goal was to lay off of certain pitches. And that takes a lot. That's a mental game with yourself that you have to play, that I can't hit that pitch. I have to let it go. I have to let it go. And, you brought up the 11 pitch at bats. Even when he's struggling, he's showing that guy on deck, hey, here's what this pitcher has. I'm going to follow off some pitches. I'm going to battle. Regardless if I make an out here, you're going to see something that you may want to see in that on-deck circle or in the dugout for these guys. So it's always a learning experience, and it's always about helping out your teammates. And his at-bats, especially at the beginning of the game, have been very good. And it wears down pitchers. You'd be surprised how much an 11-pitch at-bat wears down a pitcher. Not necessarily physically, but mentally. They get frustrated, and it's hard to get off of that frustration because what happens is your adrenaline starts rushing. You're like, what am I going to throw this guy, get him out? All of a sudden he hits a missile for a line drive. Then you start thinking in your head, maybe I don't have good stuff today. Maybe I have to try something else. Next thing you know, Trey Turner's in a good situation where he's going to leave a pitch out over the middle of the plate. There's a lot that goes into those opening at bats. And I think Bryson Stott, I agree with you. I think he's going to be around for a long, long time.
Speaking of openers, the Phillies used an opener Monday in what would have been Bailey Falter's start. They were trying anything they could to, get an uptick in Bailey Falter's stuff, and they gave him 4 extra days in between starts. They skipped his turn. They used Connor Brogdon as an opener. It didn't go according to plan in that game because Brogdon threw 28 pitches at the bases loaded with 2 outs. Falter had to come into the first inning, which the Phillies probably did not intend for. He strikes out Brandon Crawford in a 92.8 mile per hour fastball, which is the hardest pitch Falter's thrown all season. But then by the end of his outing, his fastball velocity in that appearance the other day, 90.5 miles per hour average, which is actually slightly down from his season average, which is more than a mile per hour down from last year. Falter's 0-7 with a 5.13 ERA. He was optioned to AAA. It was, the right move. He's been beating himself up after recent starts, looking as despondent as any Phillies pitcher I've seen in my decade covering the team. But Ricky, I guess the big question here is, what do the Phillies do in the number 5 spot? There's no ready-made solution. Like these guys, even at AAA, like Christopher Sanchez or Michael Plasmeyer, they're struggling.
They're struggling, as well as Abel. Abel had a bad game, I believe, in his last outing too. From what I understand, I haven't not gotten the name yet, but there is somebody that they're looking to put on the roster. So somebody that's not on the 40-man roster could be a possibility for the Phillies. That's all I've heard. So it's kind of hard for me to throw a report on you. So I don't really know who they're talking about right now. But
yeah, there's this kid, Noah Skuro, 24-year-old right-hander who's not on the 40-man roster, and he actually started Tuesday night for Lehigh Valley. So he would be on turn Sunday when that spot comes up. But I mean, he struggled in his start Tuesday. Not necessarily seen as like a top prospect. It's only May, the middle of May, and you're already wondering, like, what are the Phillies going to do the rest of the season in that spot? Are they going to have to continuously use openers?
Well, I think the one thing that you have to go out and get somebody. I mean, there's been some releases early season that maybe you could sneak in for a couple starts that you might be able to pick a guy up, throw him on the 40-man, and maybe bring him in, a guy who was on another team that was struggling a little bit if you think you could fix him. I think you go in that direction. If not, you start looking for trades. I mean, sometimes you got to give something to get something. And if you're going to waste away every 5th day, I don't think that's beneficial to a team that thinks they want to go back to the World Series. I think you have to get into a situation where you're comfortable 1 through 5, which the funny part is coming out of spring training, we were all pretty comfortable, or well, not really coming out of spring training because we all had Andrew Painter, thinking Andrew Painter was going to be in that rotation. But I mean, the one thing you felt comfortable about was the starting pitching. And now all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, we've had some ups and downs, even with the 1, 2, 3 starters. Ranger didn't look up to par in his one start, but I would assume that's going to get better as time goes on. But time ticks. We're a quarter through the season right now. You would think the Phillies would want to be pretty comfortable as to where they were in their starting rotation right now, and they're just not there. And I think it's a little bit of a problem. I mean, even you go as far as Aaron Nola. I mean, I know he's had a couple good starts, but I mean, are you really 100% comfortable right now with Nola yet? I'm not there. I think he's on his way up. His velocity's starting to come up a little bit. And, as far as Bailey Falter, I mean, he was a guy who was supposed to be more or less a stand-in, maybe even a number 6 starter, you could say, on this team. And I just think him losing 2 miles an hour is huge because, as we all know, he has the longest reach towards home plate releasing the baseball. And you take off a couple miles an hour, then that doesn't matter anymore. You get back up 93, 94, now it looks like 96, 97 coming in. So
he's also exclusively fastball curveball.
Right.
It's not like he has a deep repertoire. So if the fastball's not missing any bats, then hitters know that they really only have to sit on the hook.
That's the other thing I was getting to, was that he has to change up the way he pitches. And the reason why I say that is when you get to the big leagues, nobody knows you. Okay. When you have some starts or you have a season under your belt, now there's a book on you. Now people know what to look for. And I think he's also running into that nobody's really afraid of him. They know he likes to elevate the fastball. They could lay off of that now. So there's a book. So people know how he's going to pitch. He hasn't changed the way he pitches. And until you do that or add something else to your repertoire, they're going to sit on certain things. They're going to sit on fastballs with him early in the count. And if they get one, you know what? These are major league hitters. They're going to hit a fastball. So he's got to change his repertoire, if you ask me.
And to your point about, going out and looking at external options, these guys are available all the time. Like, you remember Chase Anderson, who was with the Phillies 2 years ago? Chase Anderson, I saw earlier this month, he latched on with the Tampa Bay Rays and pitched 5 scoreless innings, got let go, signed with the Rockies, made a start, pitched 5 scoreless innings. So there's always the opportunity to go out and maybe cycle through these back-end starter candidates, try to ride a hot hand. If the only alternative in the short term is to be using openers, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. I could see the Phillies going to Christopher Sanchez at some point. Again, he's on the 40-man roster. As you had mentioned, Noah Skuro is not. He might be, the option for this next start, but the Phillies don't need that number 5 spot again until Sunday. They have their final.
As far as that backfired, the opener, I just don't like it for this team. I just don't think it helps out this team. I could see if you had Nick Nelson, but I mean, Connor Brogdon, changing their patterns, changing their wavelengths in their minds, not the greatest thing in the world. I mean, I guess you could start Strom, but you're also looking at his innings right now. He's coming off, I believe, 44 2/3 last year, 25 the year before. If you're thinking to do that and he goes 2 innings there, now his innings are starting to go up. When he's going to hit like 60 innings and be fried. I mean, I can't see him being one of those guys that is fresh all year long unless Rob uses them like he's using them right now, which is basically once every 2 or 3 days, if you're lucky. So, I mean, I look at it this way. Get those guys in the bullpen are meant to be out in the bullpen. You try to keep them out there. And I just think the opener thing is not – we saw it the other night. It's just not a good thing for this team. Certain teams could do it. The Rays could do it. Go ahead. But this is not a team that you need that or want that.
The Rays also raise their guys through the organization in a way to be prepared to do stuff like that. Connor Brogdon, for example, has made himself more valuable to the Phillies this season by going multiple innings. He's gotten at least 5 outs 5 times this season, but it's different when you're doing that in the 5th or 6th, or the 6th or 7th, than when you're coming out and starting a game, just coming out of the bullpen and starting the game. And as you had mentioned with Matt Strahm, the Phillies are being very protective of him. Rob Thompson said he's a 2 or 3 times a week maximum guy right now. If the Phillies use him as an opener, or if the Phillies use him early in a game, they still would like to do it behind a bulk guy. They don't want him to be throwing a ton of pitches. So they're not really totally set up to be able to go with a bullpen game every 5th day and make it work. There are some teams that do, but we'll see how the Phillies address that 5th spot in the rotation, which again does not come up until Sunday. They have the series finale in San Francisco. Then they have a homestand against the Cubs and Diamondbacks, 2 pretty good offenses, both much improved offenses. And then the Phillies have that 10-game NL East road trip where we're finally going to get to see the Braves and we're finally going to get to see the Mets. And if you think things are going poorly for the Phillies right now, they're going even worse for the Mets. Okay, that is a disaster waiting to happen. It's already been a disaster. They're down Edwin Diaz for the season. Buck Showalter's already made the excuse of the World Baseball Classic hurting them. Justin Verlander got lit up last night by the Rays. Max Scherzer has missed some starts here between a suspension and a neck problem. They're thin in the rotation. So it's looking like the Braves are going to be the class of the division again.
And they always are. I mean, the Braves are always this regular season juggernaut. I mean, they've been like that for a long time, and it's a pain in the ass is what it really is when you look at it, because it seems as though even if they get injuries, they could fill the holes, and they've always been able to do that. They've had a good minor league system for a long period of time, and that helps them out. I mean, when you really think about it, look at all the guys that have come up from their minor league system and are contributing on that ball club right now. It doesn't hurt to have Acuna. I mean, but if you look at it, Austin Riley really hasn't gotten going yet. So, that team's always going to be tough, and it's never going to be easy when you play the Braves. But, the Phillies, when they come home, I have no problem when they're at home. I feel like they're a completely different team at Citizens Bank Park. They go on the road, and then you didn't bring up the fundamentals yet, because that Brandon Marsh now for the second time in 2 road trips threw a ball to nobody in between 3rd and home. And the only thing that I don't get are the excuses. Well, I bobbled the ball and I didn't want the guy to go to second. Guess what? You throw it towards 3rd base or towards home, he's going to go to second anyways. So hit your cutoff, man. That's the bottom line here. And we're just seeing too many mental mistakes still by the Phillies. That's still got to be worked out. I thought it would go away after about 3 weeks of the season, but that hasn't gone away yet. You got to be smarter in the field. We saw Nick Castellanos drop a fly ball the other day, although he doesn't even get an error because they get the guy at second base, so it's a fielder's choice. But everything's kind of got to be patchwork back together and then play ball. I mean, I feel like they beat themselves sometimes.
The play that hurt the most in that game was the soft pop-up behind first base that Cody Clemens didn't see, that Bryson Stott got to at the very last second, and the ball goes into his glove and then just bounces out and trickles away from both guys. Guy comes all the way around from first base to score. That was the decisive inning for the Giants, and that just kind of summarizes how things have been going for the Phillies lately on defense. But yeah, to your point, they have airmailed some throws this season. They have thrown to the wrong base. They have missed cutoff men, and those extra bases, they add up. It feels like each time it's happened, that runner has come around to score too. You look at like that stat, defensive runs saved. You hear a guy's -5 or +7 defensive runs saved. That is literally in real time what a defensive run saved is versus the opposite of it is when you throw to the wrong base, it allows a guy to move up and maybe he scores on a ground ball when he otherwise wouldn't.
And especially on your corners, you got 2 guys that aren't very fleet of foot. So there's going to be a lot of baseballs dropping in front of them, which we've seen a lot, especially Schwarber. I mean, I don't know what's up with his knees, but he's not getting around very well. I just think it should be a simple fix. This is one of those things you work on. Like if you're on the road, you go to the ballpark early, you just work on hitting a cutoff, man. It's not that hard. It's not that. That's why these things bother me so much. Because it's fundamental baseball. It's not about analytics. It's about throwing a baseball. It's about physical. It's about throwing the ball to a cutoff guy who should be about 100 feet in front of you. So that shouldn't even be a problem. You just got to know what's going on in front of you. Think about if the ball's hit to you, what am I doing with it? It's that simple. These are things that you learn in Little League. Hey, if the ball's hit to you, where are you going? You've heard coaches in Little League yell out, hey, if If it's hit to you, get the runner at second base. I mean, it's that simple sometimes. And I just think, being bad on those, that's never going to help you in a game, but it will always hurt you in a game.
Well, we'll see if the Phillies can turn things around in their series finale in San Francisco before coming back home for those 6 games at Citizens Bank Park against the Cubs and the Diamondbacks. It's been 5 straight wins, 5 straight losses, one way or another for the Phillies for weeks now. They actually haven't gone win-loss or loss-win in consecutive games in nearly 3 weeks. It's just been all streaks. So hopefully they can start a good one. Thanks for listening to the Phillies Talk podcast. I'm Corey. He's Ricky. We'll catch you soon.